Swami Ram, in one of the experiments, he was giving, talking, lecturing, and his muscle tension was equivalent to what is considered to be equivalent to a cough. When he is speaking, his heart rate is very less. So that suggests that there is something more as a source of energy which is running our system.
Now, what does that say? Because we've been taught that all energy comes from essential oxygenation of the blood and taking it to different parts. But hey, if I can show you that's not happening, but this person is still active, what's going on?
So for that, our term is.
Welcome everyone to another episode of The Overcorrection. Today we are in studio with the team from Dharmawiki.
One of my very revered professors asked us what is Indian about Indian Institute of Technology. Is it just that incidentally we are in India, or is it meant to be for India? That got my head reeling.
This famous pop culture movie came out, right? Oppenheimer, and then he has that famous quote from the Gita. Bhagwan Krishna is saying, I am become death. But that is their Western interpretation of that word. It's actually time. But Kal. And they viewed Kal as death. Like, oh, this is like a militant call to action, this, that. But that's not what we're saying. We're saying time destroys all.
If you're going to view the Indian languages only from an English perspective, you're going to actually create a battlefield.
If we say Sthanu, for example, it means Shiva. And Sthanu also means a rock, an immovable and insensible rock. So how do you decide what is Sthanu over there?
A nice statement I heard from my spiritual master is, we should love people and use things rather than use people and love things.
That which holds the society together, that is dharma.
जो अभी हम ये चर्चा कर रहे हैं वो किसकी है? धर्म को लेकर के, अध्यात्म को लेकर के। ये ज्ञान यज्ञ। दूसरा दान जो देते हैं वो दान यज्ञ।
Purchasing something from the market and giving it up is not at all sacrifice.
So today we are discussing Dharma, and we're going to be discussing Dharma with the team from Dharmawiki. Puru and I had an absolute blast having them on the show. We got into all sorts of topics. Why is Dharma considered anti-science, anti-progress? And if so, then what is an organization like Dharmawiki doing coming out of IIT Mumbai? And while considering that these two points of view are at odds with one another, what are the actual steps we can take to bridge this gap between traditional ancient teachings and modern scientific teaching? Can both parties actually benefit from this bridging? So we've discussed everything from music to morality, from translation to astronomy. And because of the vastness of these topics, we're going to be releasing this episode in 2 parts. Additionally, I would like to add that Professor Ganesh Ji, one of the spearheads of the Dharmawiki movement, was available with us only for a short period of time. So the starting part of the conversation focuses mostly on his point of view, following which we get to hear more from all our other esteemed guests. I hope you guys have as much fun watching this one as we had recording it. Once again, this is The Overcorrection, and let's get started. Welcome everyone to another episode of The Overcorrection. Today we are in studio with... Okay, dude, we're in studio with a lot of people today.
Yeah, this is a really special episode.
Yeah, so we are actually with the team from Dharmawiki. And when we reached out to them to have someone come on the podcast, they said, hey, there's no one person who can actually represent Dharmawiki. It is not an individual's movement. It is a collective movement. In fact, there are not even 5 people who can represent Dharmawiki, but that's as many as we could fit into this studio.
Probably a lot of people will be wondering what is Dharmawiki, and obviously our guests are going to give us a full overview of what it is, what its mission is, and what it's going to be doing for our community. But broadly, Dharmawiki is a unified knowledge platform that presents traditional viewpoints of Sanatan Dharma as well as Bharat's heritage. And I think this was launched as a response to what people found was a heavily Western bias in traditional popular media forms such as Wikipedia. So without further ado, I think
I would request each of you to give a brief introduction as to who you are and what your background is, especially so we can pay attention to the very diverse group of people we have here.
Thank you. Namaste. I'm Ganesh Ramakrishnan, a professor at the Department of Computer Science and Engineering at IIT Bombay. My background is largely computer science. I did my graduation BTech from IIT Bombay. I was to go for a PhD to a very reputed university in the US. But during the 4th year of my BTech, one of my very revered professors asked us a very striking question. What is Indian about Indian Institute of Technology? Is it just that incidentally we are in India, or is it meant to be for India? That got my head reeling. I decided to continue my PhD at IIT Bombay, and I have no regrets.
Hi, so my name is Ashish Pandey. I am a professor in the School of Management. My area of research has been on Karma Yoga and its implication on business organizations. So from the PhD time, I have been exploring the Indic ideas when it was not so fashionable.
So myself, Kanakavalli Santhanam. I am a seeker in the fields of Samskrita, Sangeeta and Nritya, and I am part of the project team at Dharmawiki.
Namaste. I am Srinischala Manyam, and I have authored several articles on Dharmawiki. I am an author over there. And I have a biotechnology background, a science background with medical pathology and other subjects in my pre-degree programs. And apart from that, I was basically very interested in learning Sanskrit from the young age. So I even took up Sanskrit studies along with my science subjects.
नमस्ते, मेरा नाम अनुराग मनरसिया और बाल्यकाल प्रथमा अर्थात कक्षा 5 से ही संस्कृत में प्रवेश हुआ गुरुकुल में और ऋग्वेद अध्ययन करने को उपरांत में वेदांग ज्योतिष आदि का अध्ययन हुआ और धर्मविकी टीम के साथ जुड़ करके शास्त्र आदि के विषय में ऊपर लेखन कार्य.
Yeah, so right there, guys, I think you can see the wealth, the expansive wealth of knowledge just these 5 people are bringing to the table, and they are not the only 5 associated with Dharmawiki. So you can just imagine what this organization has behind them, all sorts of people. Now, look, I have to get this question out there first, because look, if we had to say simply, not simplistically, but simply what modern, young, progressive India thinks of concepts of dharma, Indic tradition, traditional values in general, it is this idea that they are, for the lack of a better word, backwards, regressive, something at odds with science and progress, the science which has got us to where we are today as a species. So, given this thought, what is a foundation like Dharmawiki doing coming out of IIT Bombay, the paragon in India and globally of producing the finest scientific minds accredited by all Western standards? How did this happen?
Very interesting question from multiple perspectives. If I look back at the journey of Dharmawiki, as I pointed out earlier, since my BTech days, I was inspired to look at systems, right? By training, by profession, computer science, thermodynamic systems, electromagnetic systems, why can't there be systems, systemic view of understanding not only oneself, but also one's interdependence with the society? I talked about one reason why I stayed back, but my spiritual mentor was another very strong reason. In fact, when I went to my guru after my PhD and asked if I could, I should go to California for a postdoc or go to IBM India Research Labs, which was in Delhi. He said, go to Delhi, it's close to Vrindavan. California is too far from Vrindavan. That was an amazing frame of reference. Totally mind-boggling, right? So I think it starts a lot with the thought process. Now, coming back to this very important question you raised, what is a computer scientist doing here? Right? When we started studying potential moderation policies for Dharmawiki, how would you kind of create consensus? Was there a consensus based on which our Shastras were written, whether it's Smritis or Shrutis for that matter? We realized that actually there's some very, very well laid out methodologies, what we today refer to as literature review, right?
Scientific method.
Peer reviewing. Right. All of that was there, right? One of them, for example, is Tantra Yukti. Now, Tantra Yukti has some 36 principles. I'm happy to read out, right? Adhikarana, which is about the main subject matter. Yoga, which is unifying concepts from different places. Now, if you read up a literature like even Arthashastra, so Chanakya, when he tries and kind of gets Chandragupta Maurya and the entire troop, right, to protect the boundaries of Bharatvarsha then, he has significantly enters into this Purva Paksha, Uttara Paksha, right? What has been said about Artha economics in the past. You loved economics, your representation, right? So what do the previous literature have to say about economics? And then he brings up his perspective from the contemporary situation then.
Right.
He talks about different kinds of Vijayas there, which I won't get into. So Uttara Paksha, Purva Paksha are also part of Tantra Yukti. So this is a strong framework. The idea is that you should be able to summarize the other person's point of view faithfully, get a certificate from the other person that I have faithfully represented you. I wish husbands do this with their spouses today. I can always get my statement endorsed by myself, but to get my statement endorsed by the other side, that is a rigor.
I'm taking notes on stuff I didn't think I would take them on.
I'm very happy my wife hears this.
So, that's actually so cool that you said that, because people have this idea that this ancient knowledge came in one day, someone woke up and wrote it down. But no, you're describing a scientific process very much similar to what we do today. Someone has looked at what was done 50 years ago back then, built on it, evaluated it, tried to see if it's held merit, and actually represented that in the text and shown you this process.
Amazing. Absolutely. And this systemic view with this guardrail of I talked about Tantra Yukti, which has 36. Well, I later on realized I'm heading this national initiative for Gen AI called Bharat Gen. And as part of that, we did further research, and we found that there is something even more elaborate called Vada Marga, which has 44 of them, right? And what is interesting is this lets us be agile. Agility is built into Dharma. What we call in Hindi as Lachilapan. It is there. Nothing is fossilized, right? That's how we had texts evolving all the time. We had the tradition of writing texts from time to time because we had this framework. And yes, we have literature review today. We have debating systems. Why can't we also learn and possibly acknowledge beyond a footnote the traditions of the past, right?
Since we have Ganeshji for a short time, I have to ask you this question because it's an area I'm really interested in, and you just touched on it, right? It's the idea of AI and Gen AI, right? And you are in the space of computer science. I was reading a lot, which is actually a bit scary, right? So the models that ChatGPT use, for example, they are inherently Western in their framework as well, right? Coded, written in English, likely by, say, a white male, right? Or that's the kind of information that is amassed. So what implications does that have for India, right? Where our knowledge systems are anyways often misinterpreted by those from the West.
Yeah, just a quick add-on note. Now, if you Google something, you won't even get a chance to say, read the top 5 search results and pick yours. AI generates an answer and gives it to you.
But the problem here is that the NLP systems that have been so far done up, I would like to say Western in their outlook. So how can Bharat AI even tackle something like this?
See, one is to have a very scale-up model where the model keeps growing big. It tries to be a jack of all trades and also master of all trades. The other is to have a scale-out model, a tree model, a honeybee model, a cloud model, right, which takes water and then helps disseminate that. That's the model we have adopted at Bharat Gen, specifically a scale-out model, because that can empower. And what I also learned from my mentor, Professor Date, is that technology could be supplementary, or it could be complementary, or it could be substitutional. Unless we understand the technology and in the spirit of Tantra Yukti and Vada Marg, out of respect, with respect, right? You need to respect the technology before you dissect it. Identify how it could be supplementary to our current ecosystem, both social, educational ecosystem, how it could be complementary, and also be wary of the substitutional aspects, right? I see that Gen AI actually holds great potential from a supplementary and complementary perspective, where people who were good at their domains need to be much better at their domains. So it is not threatening domain experts. It's going to actually put a check on quack work in respective domains, because AI is going to challenge you. If you bring the complementary or supplementary aspect from there, it can in fact lead to mushrooming of domain experts in India.
So maybe the substitution aspect is good. Let it weed out some of the people who aren't actually pulling their own weight.
Well, time will tell.
So you've given a beautiful explanation to show that, look, what we call the modern scientific method, the scientific process, there has been representation of that clearly, expressly, not just in thought, in the texts themselves, which people may not know. Yet, wherein now, if I took, say, modern day, where did this idea that science is antithetical to traditional teaching come from?
Or Indic philosophy.
Or Indic philosophy, or maybe whatever traditional philosophy, even if we had to remove. Where did this start? Because I wouldn't have been with Wikipedia. Wikipedia is probably where it's expressing itself and proliferating. Where do you think this started? You all have been around much longer than us, and I think you all have seen this proliferate over decades.
Thanks again for that very important question. I think this happens time and again when empathy either gets lost or it gets deprioritized. When compassion, when the feeling of being one, rather than a siloed approach to individuals in society, it's when we have the feeling of belongingness, a family spirit, it's but natural that I don't look at people as consumers.
Right.
I don't look at people as tools or instruments. A nice statement I heard from my spiritual master is, we should learn to, love people and use things rather than use people and love things. So when the principle of the spiritual practice, which helps this thought process flourish, not just the thought process, but this behavior flourish, weakens, in my opinion, in my understanding and also observation over decades, is when well-being gets commodified, right? Whereas well-being is an entire process. Now coming back to my area, computer science, since I talked about the systemic view, if Dharma, the principles from Dharma of the systemic view of empathy, I gave the examples of Purva Paksha and Uttara Paksha, so much empathy all out there, right? If they are inculcated in the way so-called modern technology and science also looks at the ancient literature, I think we'll find a lot to benefit from. And yes, there are areas where we will need to improvise upon given the current situation. And that facility always exists. And that's the reason I gave the example of Chanakya Arthashastra. Now, if you peek into our literature, you'll find so much on astronomy, and you'll find Dharmawiki reflecting engineering, technology, architecture, governance, administration. I mean, there's linguistics, which is very close to my heart. The way, if you look at the Paninian framework, right, the pratyaharas, I mean, that's how macros have been built into programming languages. If you look at the way phonetics are so beautifully codified, are expounded upon in the literature, right? Our Vyakarana and Shiksha Shastra, you'll find that there's a lot we can benefit, especially when it comes to the synthesis or the unification of Indian languages. There's a lot in commonality. The Karaka frameworks bring together Indian languages. Yes, they have their variations. But if you're going to view the Indian languages only from an English perspective, you're going to actually create a battlefield, which is not the case. I'm very happy with my colleague, Professor Arna Bhattacharya, and a couple of others. We brought out this book called Samanvay, a framework for inspired very much by Panini and the culture of Sanskrit, to view the unification of Indian languages. This being reflected in computational sciences can actually break the barriers, because Indian languages are kind of very much marginalized. Less than 1% representation of Indian languages across.
On this Indian languages front, my grandmother was explaining to me one time about how the letters in the Devanagari script are actually written systematically according to the shape of your mouth. So like all the k, kha, kha, kha is all one part of your tongue going that. And it sort of reminded me of this idea you were saying that, hey, there are all these systems, like this is a systematic method. And people would argue much more systematic method than say your A, B, C, D, E, F, G.
akuha visarjaniyanam kantaha, ichuyashanam talu. Now, all this is also codified, right? It becomes easy to, macros all over the place, right? And that's how Ashtadhyayi is.
So, I think staying on the topic of science, how do we bring these concepts through the modern scientific process, A, and 2, maybe is it important that we do that?
As I said, if we open our eyes to the reality where we are today and also approach things holistically, that's very important. There's the problem, challenges we see today can be viewed in a very myopic sense. You can have a battle set up for every problem that you see and perceive and are disturbed with. Perceive them, acknowledge them, but look at things more holistically, well-being more holistically. But coming also to so there's a iha and a para, right? There's a para is what I was alluding to. But there's also the iha, the literal problems we have with food scarcity, with water management. Yeah. I mean, as I pointed out, that the scriptures and the traditions, why were there wells or water ponds at every temple? And there are faculty at IIT Bombay who study this. Yeah. Wow. Right? I'm sure Professor Ashish Bande is going to talk more about it.
So on this note, just wanted to point out to everyone out there is, I'm personally a big fan of reading about economics, and there's just this amazing lecture given by Professor Vaidyanath about the pitfalls of economy without dharma. It was given at the Dharmawiki launch, and it really explains modern day economic problems so beautifully in detail, given information given to you from ancient teachings. And it is not, it is something that actually will hold true now. It is not something that is too dated to apply today, which is what I thought was amazing. So right now there's a whole discussion going around things like, say, medicine. So now, look, no one is saying take untested products and just start consuming them and all. But as we've seen what people laugh in the West laughing at haldi 25 years ago, today now turmeric is being ghus out into every product. It's lab tested, it's this, and it took America to love turmeric and take turmeric baths now and stuff like that for us to start.
Like they had to repackage it and sell it back to us.
So do you see that maybe there's a good element to that in the sense that, hey, it's good that Haldi went through its double-blind testing study and now we've gone randomized control trials done on it. It's shown positive effects. That's a good thing. And there's this quote that I always like to bring up that I wanted your thoughts on is that, hey, traditions are just experiments that worked, which is kind of how we do science today anyways.
Yes. And you actually made an important point here. This also calls for equipping people with traditional knowledge with the tools and the methodology that gets adopted today. I'm not necessarily subscribing to randomized control trials because there's a big lobby against that. Okay. But there are many others.
I meant in general.
Right. If you look at the area of multiomics, why can't we understand the entire digestive system, metabolomics, and see its connection with one's food and lifestyle?
Gut health that is going on right now. Gut health,
yes. So there's a lot that is on offer. And I think that's exactly where we also need programs for so-called, bridging.
Bridging. I think that's what's key because there's an element of, hey, we can talk to each other in separate circles, but hey, if you want, like, you make, like we joked about this, but the people I heard about Dharmawiki from, older people in our families, correct, people who are probably already a little inclined towards and receptive towards this knowledge. But there's versions of us, who grew up till very recently, who would not be open to a discourse unless, say, it was proposed to me through not necessarily an RCT, but some type of scientific.
Like, was it on Nature or was it on, which have then since also come under so much fire?
Is there like a nice chart over there that shows, I'm used to.
But that's because we were sold that as being the only source of truth.
But do you think it's important that you said that as much as, say, we need to educate one population on traditional teachings, do you think that people who know the traditional teachings need to be educated on the bridge, which is the scientific method to pull the other side over?
Let me take the example of Wiki.
Okay, let's do it.
Why did we go for Wiki for Dharma? Why couldn't it be a blog? It would be a website, and many have subscribed to those media. Well, Wiki gave you a framework for moderation, for discussion. We could set our own moderation policies, but it gave you a framework. So understanding technology is of paramount importance. Otherwise, you'll end up, having a knee-jerk reaction to the choice of technology, or you throw away the baby with the bathtub.
Are you doing it in English? I'm sure everyone who speaks Sanskrit well already buys into this stuff. It's the English speakers who don't buy into it. The people speaking in their Matrabhasha don't really need a lecture on decoloniality. I need one.
So just coming back to this, right? If we want to now take the English data on Dharmawiki to scale, we need technology. We need machine translation. But we need machine translation that respects the domain constraints. We don't want random translations coming up, because every word has its nuanced translation in a particular context. I'm very grateful that thanks to the work we have done with the ministry, we've actually evolved this entire platform called Udan. We're going to receive an award for that tomorrow, an impactful research award. And because of that, we can do translation with constraints, high fidelity translation. You can inject dictionaries and say, I want a translation that adheres to this constraint. Now, human in the loop. This is a paradigm we can bring. India can bring human in the loop in AI. So unless we own it up and understand with empathy the Purva Paksha, Uttara Paksha process, either we'll be at loss, or it could be the other way, right? We are at the receiving end.
And I was going to say something that I thought you said I found really poignant, was when you were talking about how there's been a fundamental lack of a holistic approach, right? It's almost a negative way to approach things. Say, we had taken the example of health. And you think about what are the open systems where people get knowledge from, say, even on health, right? The wiki of that, say, like the joke is about WebMD in the US, right? You have a stomach ache, you go on WebMD and they'll tell you have cancer. So, but it feeds this constant negative cycle, which is perhaps even ruining their state of mental being even more. Can Dharmawiki and things like that fill that gap? Can it be a platform that people can turn to, for answers that maybe they're not getting anywhere else?
And these are areas where we are putting special effort in Dharmawiki. I already gave example of some areas: engineering, technology, architecture, agriculture is another big area, right? So bring to the fore literature in the past. In some cases, there could be detailed articles. In some cases, it could be table of content. We did that for Nirnay Sindhu. Just make the literature available with a table of content. Make it navigable in the first place. So there are some approaches where we are trying to just scale this entire approach so that all the literature is made available for first-hand reading, but through indexing and table of contents.
I have to ask a question on the languages and translation front. I know one of your principle is non-translatability to some level, but as we've also discussed, hey, you need to bridge that gap. When you were talking about how y'all are changing paradigms with translation, building really hyper-focused translations, maybe there's something specific about India. We are actually one of the countries which has the most languages. We probably have a better handle on how to translate things as a culture than a lot of other countries do. And they will not have that cross-talk the way we have internally within our country. Do you feel that is an advantage that we have?
There's a big advantage. The advantage is also because Sanskrit and the framework that Sanskrit has offered lets you do Vyutpatti, lets you come up with terminology, right? We don't have to necessarily just transliterate words. You can if you wish.
What is transliterate?
So transliterate is to render gravity as gravity, gravitational as a gravitational.
Transliterating what the person is.
Right?
But just change the script and not the...
Just adapt the script of Devanagari and render English.
That's like what I say is like, can you read Hindi? Yeah, when it's written in English.
Yeah, so that's like your transliteration keyboard also. So when you type in English, that's your transliterated keyboard.
And one can go overboard. Just transliterate every technical term, including all their morphological variants. Like I was giving, gravitational bhi kar diya, aapne gravity kar diya.
Means I asked my grandmother, I was like, you learned multiplication in Hindi? I was like, there are words for all the math things I learned in Hindi. It's like, oh, ahit na. Of course, ahit.
My grandfather was a South Indian, but because he was born and brought up here in the mills, he used to recite the multiplication tables in Gujarati.
Yeah.
And if you just do a little bit of scratching of the surface, you'll find that the terms, many of the English terms, you'll find connection with the Sanskrit terms. That's another, we can keep that for another discussion. I don't want to open a can of worms. But more practically, there are also very simple terms that are on the offering, right? So, as I said, we can actually have terms generated. So we worked very closely with a Commission for Scientific and Technical Terminology, doing amazing work.
Can you give one example just of one of the
Vector can be called Sadish.
And before it was vector or something, some like
Vectorization, right? Then you'll have all of that transliterated. Make the text very difficult to. रस चला जाता है पढ़ने में, right? रस भी तो चाहिए.
I wanted to ask you something about in this translation part, or the way that translation has not been done well, right? One part is that, look, it's not being done well and there's an intrinsic wrong in that. But two is, what are the implications what have been the implications of this as a result? And one example I know, and I'm sure you guys know about this one, and I might even be wrong, so we can cut it out if I'm wrong. But I had this conversation with my friend, and they were saying how this famous pop culture movie came out, right? Oppenheimer, and then he has that famous quote from the Gita, where they say that Bhagwan Krishna is saying, I am become death. But that is their Western interpretation of that word. It's actually time. I have become time destroyer of worlds. But Kal. And they viewed Kal as death. But that's like such a small thing, but in their framework, that means something completely different. So they're like, oh, this is like a militant call to action, this, that. But that's not what we're saying. We're saying time destroys all.
God, and then the whole irony is that people will take a wrong, like you'll hear this after Oppenheimer came out in circles, it's like, he quotes the Bhagavad Gita and there, right? I am become death.
Yeah.
So proudly, incorrectly restating your own culture because it has been appropriated into, who is it? Steven Spielberg? Who is it?
This is Christopher Nolan.
Nolan's movie.
But are there a lot of cases of this? I mean, Kal is one example, but I'm sure there's tons, right? From Doniger to all these people that have interpreted.
Yes. Yeah. So, as I said, context plays an important role. Yeah. And there are also reasons why sometimes you'll have the same word indicate, like Atma. Yeah. At times it's referring to the body, referring to the mind. In my personal practice and journey, I found that there is a reason why this also exists, to show the continuum, that Atma is a continuum.
The vagueness of the world is like, what we would call vagueness is actually not vague.
It's an interconnectedness. Well-being is about interconnectedness. Dharma is actually to connect, not to create silos.
Maybe in a way, that's why the word karma actually can mean different things in different contexts, right? It can be your karma as your work, or it can be your karma as your
past karmas.
The spiritual, your past karmas. But hey, maybe those words are the same for a reason. Because your work is in some context your past karma and it's your future karma, I guess.
I just want to give a nice example and conclude. My spiritual guru, is Srila Prabhupada, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. So when he went for the first time to the US, Boston Harbor, and he saw this word alloy, right? And he was translating books. So it was Shuddha Bhakti is what he was trying to present. And he used a translation, unalloyed devotion. Because he saw this keyword alloy. So when you have this dharmic frame of mind, you can actually come up with very interesting phrases in English. Right?
Wow, that's amazing.
So that's how inclusive Dharma is.
And I hope that through platforms like Dharmawiki, people learn about this more, right? At least read about our culture, our history in the right way, right? Because I think it was funny, the first time I ended up studying in detail about this was when I went to college abroad, and I was studying the same things. And obviously you can imagine reading Richard Eaton, you're reading Wendy Doniger, you're reading all these people that have a very significant, somewhat maybe even Marxist bias towards the Hindu faith in general, right? So a lot of the kids are going there and aise seekh ke aa rahe wapas. So that's a problem, and I hope
the risk of not having the appropriate word and using that translation is actually it disconnects you from the whole body of work, the whole knowledge tradition. So there's a one word now government is also using is Indian knowledge systems. So these are the systems. For example, in the Ayurveda there are terms of Vata, Pitta and Kapha. Now if you translate Pitta into fire, somewhere at some places they have done it, then you miss out on the whole psychology, physiological characteristics, what are the aushadhis for that, what are the particular food which are increasing or decreasing Pitta, the personality type, whole lot. You just, because the moment you say fiery element,
the hothead, that's all he is.
That's it. So one thing and another example, which has become a big industry. So, sorry to say that, but that's had become an industry because it is used for a lot of commercial purposes. It's a mindfulness. Everybody is talking about mindfulness.
I think I've heard of it, yeah.
Nothing wrong. It is good. It is useful practice as a practice. But what is the problem of not using the appropriate word which is given in the Buddhism? Though the propounders of the mindfulness, they acknowledge the Buddhist origin. From where the word has come? Word has come, this mindfulness term, as a reaction to mindlessness. Since mindlessness is a problem, if you do things mindfully, there is a probability of you losing out, there's a probability of not making right decisions and you feeling agitated and all and so forth. But what is the exact term for the, if you look at the Buddhist tradition, what is the mindfulness? That word is, the closest to that is Samyak Smriti. Samyak means balanced. Smriti means remembrance. So you remember what you are doing, you remember your identity, you remember what is the purpose. That word is not only common in Buddhism. In Kabir's literature, Surati is the same word. Lot of Shabad in the Guru Granth Sahib also talk about Surati. That is one thing. So being present and not forgetting what needs to be remembered always. Okay, that is one. But that is only the first layer. Now, can you have right Samyak Smriti as just by your intention? No. You need a practice. So before the Samyak Smriti comes Samyak Vyayam. That's what Buddha said. So this makes the whole eightfold path. So before Smriti, there is a Samyak Vyayam. Vyayam means right exercise. What are the exercises? Vrat is one exercise. Maintaining the intentions, practicing. Not eating at certain point of day is an exercise. Not killing is an exercise. All the yamas given in the yoga, these are the exercises. These are the exercises to remember what always to be remembered. I am divine. This world is the reflection of the divinity. I am responsible to the whole existence. All these are things to be, because that is codified in the Panch Mahayagnas. So you can forget the Mahayagnas.
And in today's day and age, I mean, if you talk about yoga, so I've been practicing yoga for a while, and when I first started practicing yoga, it's just about like stretching because you get sore after playing football. You know, I mean, that is where people join a yoga class from. And I have friends who are professional yogis, and you know, I've learned from them that, hey, this is just the means to the next step, you know, and it's not. And yet this concept of yoga, again, it had to be popularized in the US. You had to do yoga classes in yoga pants, which are not actually meant for yoga.
So yoga is not exercise.
I just want to conclude with one point.
Please.
I think it's important to also highlight the kind of work that Professor Ram Subramaniam and his genre of people are doing here. Because earlier we talked about, you know, this bridging, right? I mean, of course, Ashish Pandey is another an exemplar in that space. Professor Ram Subramaniam, for example, he has his background in physics. He understands modern mathematics and presents ancient mathematics in the light of modern mathematics and vice versa. I think this kind of training is also very much required as part of this entire ecosystem, Indic knowledge system has been created.
Before you leave, if you have a message to the audience, you can look straight into that camera. Professor Ganesh has to leave. Thank you for making this time for us. And if you had to just say one thing, the first thing on Dharmawiki people should watch.
My appeal is, let's not wait to clap for the next Nobel laureate. So we have, if you've seen, right, one of the Nobel laureates was for this alpha folding, right? Now, why are there no Nobel laureates from India? And there could be a zillion other reasons. But I feel there is also a strong need for this empathy both ways, which is towards what exists today and towards our ancient roots as well. And when we strike that dialogue, I think India is actually a storehouse. This is my firm conviction. Not from the point of view of just celebrating its superiority on others, but actually towards the well-being of the entire world. So let's embrace this opportunity. Let's become instruments and not just try to be heroes, but instruments. I think that's what Krishna wanted Arjuna to be. Be an instrument. Nimittamatram bhava savyasachin. So let's be instruments, and being an instrument, you will actually feel great satisfaction. Right? Otherwise, this entire advertisement industry is about creating heroes or heroines, for that matter, right? But instrument can actually be a humbling position, but also a very fulfilling position, because you don't have to become like anyone else.
Love that.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you so much, Ji.
Professor. To bring it all back to where we started, Ashish Ji and the team, is science really at odds with Indic knowledge systems?
If you look at dharmic knowledge, to which Dharmawiki is committed to kind of disseminate, dharmic knowledge is not unscientific knowledge. There is a lot of science, but along with but not science in a restrictive way. If you consider science as just observability, measurability, physical manifestation, is the life only about the physical manifestations? Then how you will communicate how much, what is the quantity of love you have for your wife or for your kid? There is another aspect which is related to our feelings, our worldview, our understanding. But there is something more to that. That is about transcendental. I really like the classification of the Kane Wilber. What he says that it's an integral psychologist. He says that there are different ways of knowing. One is eye of flesh, another is eye of mind, another is eye of spirit. So eye of flesh is physicality, objectivity, measurability. But there is an eye of mind, which is about subjective feeling, values, beliefs, connections, relationship. And then there is an eye of spirit, which is about sacredness, transcendence, feeling of awe, interconnectedness, which is embodied, but it is not only physicality. What we experience in the presence of nature or in meditation or in spiritual practices. So we need not to mix these things. We need to acknowledge all these three things.
I have to ask you on that because, we referred earlier to say the fact that science has helped us make so much progress on all these fronts. From if you look at any metrics that you would measure our species from, look at life expectancy, look at infant mortality, look at our ability to recover from certain diseases. Many of these factors have benefited tremendously from, say, Western scientific method, and we clearly have improved as a species. We have discussed in this conversation itself how certain things like economy, which we have improved a lot, can still learn from these traditional systems. But, there is an area of human flourishing where progress is conspicuously not there, and that is the mental health side of it. There is no real indication to show that there have been vast improvements in, say, our rate of depression, rates of anxiety. People may even make the argument it's getting a little worse.
It's getting worse.
Actually, if you look at, I can explain this with the Indian perspective or Dharmic perspective. The Dharmic perspective suggests that human self is not only the physical or the mental, it is considered to be the panchakoshas, the 5-layered aspect of self. Physical is one aspect, which is called Annamaya Kosh, which is made up of food. Then emotional aspect, which is Manomaya Kosh, and the Manomaya Kosh and the physical Annamaya Kosh are connected by Pranamaya Kosh, the sheath of vitality. Above these three are the Vijnanamaya Kosh, which is loosely can be translated into the layer of intellect. If all four are aligned, there is a fifth layer always present, that is called Anandamaya Kosh. So that is a simple definition. That is not the exactly Vedantic perspective. Anand is actually the real nature. That's what Vedanta teaches, and that I believe. But for a scientific, a mind which is trained in the more kind of a contemporary, more positivist science, I can say, okay, Anand is the outcome, though Anand is not the outcome according to the Vedanta. But if we keep aside that fine difference, one thing is very clear, that the well-being, if it has to occur, it will occur at all four levels. Just by focusing on one layer, well-being cannot happen. There's a whole body of literature now which suggests that mental well-being and physical well-being are deeply connected. In the Ayurveda, the three bases of health are identified. Those are Nidra, Ahar, Nidra, Brahmacharya. These are the three bases. If you look at the mental health literature, the two most important factors they have identified are sleep hygiene and nature of food. There is a vast body, and there are few research groups which have looked at the impact of Mediterranean diet on depression. And in the 6-month typical randomized control trial, they found that at the 2% cost of the medicine, the impact of the Mediterranean diet was more in comparison to the medicine in a depression situations.
Science, guys.
So that clarifies that physical health and mental health are deeply connected. Then there is something called Pranamaya Kosh. This is whole area which I hope will pick up soon, but we have lot of practices in the form of Swara Vigyan. Swara Vigyan is the basis, you can say the scientific aspect or the principles behind pranayam. So pranayam we do, these are loosely translated as the breathing exercise. Now the breathing exercise, one of the basic assumptions is that breathing is not, it is not only about the chemical called oxygen, it is something more which is energy. There are 5 types of, there are 6, 7 various types of pranayams. There are 5 types of pranas. Pranas are like one pran which governs the distribution of the energy in the whole body, one pran which governs the neck and above that area. So pran,
The different seats of energy.
no, those are considered to be chakras. I am not going there. But the pranas are like different energy forms which governs our knowing, which governs the dissemination of the energy in the body, which governs the digestion, which governs the excretion, pran, apan, vyan, etc. These are the technical terms. They are further classified into the 17. We may not exactly identify where is the prana because we yet to have the instrument, but there are some indirect ways where we have actually figured out that there is something more than the physicality which is determining our behavior and which is determining our capacity. So for example, I think Swami Ram demonstrated that in one of the experiments, he was talking, lecturing, and his muscle tension was was equivalent to what is considered to be equivalent to a cock. Wow. So, and then there are so many experiments. Sadhguru in his initial days used to allow to test the heart rate, muscle tension and all that. And even if when he is speaking, his heart rate is very less. So that suggests that there is something more as a source of energy, which is which is running our system.
You can get energy without your heart pumping faster, basically. Yeah. Now, what does that say? Because we've been taught that all energy comes from essential oxygenation of the, blood and taking it to different paths. But hey, if I can show you that's not happening, but this person is still active, what's going on?
Yeah. So for that, our term is Pranamaya Kosh. We may not have direct kind of access to it with our physical instruments, but we can experience this right away. So in IIT Bombay, we have conducted this experiment since last 10 years. And then there is a term in the psychology called subjective vitality. So subjective vitality is feeling of the energy, and you can actually check it with the simple questionnaire, and that reflects, that is a kind of a poor but not inaccurate reflection of your prana shakti. One of the contributions of our team is to connect modern psychology, positive psychology with the yoga practices. So what connects yoga and psychology are our first experiment was to see its connection with the two things. One is called subjective vitality, which is sense of energy. Another is called self-transcendence.
How spiritual do you feel?
No. How connected you feel. So spiritual is an abstract term, but connectedness is an embodied experience.
Right. Can you
I'm
give
not
me an
going-
example to
Yeah.
explain the difference?
Spirituality, a sense of reverence or the kind of gratitude or is also connected to certain concepts, but I'm feeling light. I'm feeling as if I am not carrying weight. I am feeling a kind of a ease. I feel at times the boundary of myself and others are not so strict and so kind of like a watertight compartments. These are the kind of experiences captured in the self-transcendence questionnaires.
There's not even a good English word for it. That's why I'm having this
That's why
issue.
even
That's the whole
spiritual
point.
is for me a fairly Western word where they want to separate like, oh, I am spiritual but not religious. It's the only time people learn the word spiritual, right? It's a dumb word.
So we looked at what is the impact of. Then we looked at when a group of our students who were practicing this, within the 6 months' time, their readings on the subject of vitality and self-transcendence increased. How their peers actually rated them in terms of their hopefulness, resilience, that also increased. And how their peers assessed them, how helpful they were, that was also increased. And it was actually, it's a published work, so.
Do you think the correlation is great because it's going to get people to think about it. How are people going to get to the causation of it? I mean, we don't know how to measure these things. Probably our instruments are not, we've not even geared scientific instruments to even try to figure out how to read like all these things.
So causations has certain conditions. 3-4 conditions are laid out in the research method. I'm not teaching the research method course here, so I will not get into it. So that's why we have conducted experiments. It is not only survey based where we do the modeling. Modeling was done to see the connection. But whether that, so connection between the subject of vitality, self-transcendence, positive psychology, flourishing, all these are the connections. That can be checked by looking at the kind of modeling, by doing the modeling. But by changing, by giving some intervention, whether subjective vitality increases or not, self-transcendence, that is done with the experiments. So with the experiments, we have found that things which are subjective vitality, self-transcendence, self-regulation, these things have kind of increased, and that also in turn increased not only the psychological capital, we have found the grades also increased.
I wouldn't be surprised if you started measuring a whole bunch of other things in their lives.
Relationships
with
with
their
others,
partners.
with their friends, with partners, everything would have some kind of knock-on impact or benefit. Right?
Intrapersonal, interpersonal.
I mean, it's good you all didn't study where people didn't increase, but trust me, if it increased with positive intervention, negative types of intervention can cause a decrease.
Yes. So if you spend more time on the things which are non-purposive, which are not kind of not adding value to your surroundings, actually there is a diminishing impact on your well-being.
You spoke about these, say, different, like your intellect says just one level of your existence, and there are all these other different levels. And we were talking about, actually Sadhguru said this, where he asked someone, he's like, hey, do you want your mind to be sharp or blunt? And he was like, hey, I want my mind to be sharp. It's like, well, you have to be very careful with how you hold a sharp object, na? Yes. If you don't know what side is the blade and what side is the handle, you're going to get hurt. Yeah. And maybe it is these other parts of our existence that are the ones that need to know what is the blade and what is the handle.
So actually this whole conversation started with an example, you know, how the religion, dharma, science are connected. Yeah. So the well-being, in the context of well-being, that's a good context to actually to discuss the connection between religion and dharma. So the well-being, just to kind of conclude this, is that dharmic perspective gives the notion of self in the form of panchakosha. Modern science is now demonstrating that well-being can be attained not just by working on the physicality, but it is connected to our vitality, it is connected to our mentality. It is intellect is not the guarantee of the success or well-being, but it is important because that is the kind of the charioteer. In the Kathopanishad, the role of intellect is of a charioteer who holds the rein. But then there is one more in the Kathopanishad itself, it says that intellect is not the final. The one who is the owner of the charioteer, who gives the direction to the charioteer, that is the self. And that's what Dharma talks about. So a simple classification is that Adi Bhautik, Adi Daivik and Adhyatmik. So science is wonderful. The way science is understood, science is also evolving, by the way. 300 years ago, science was more positivity, more empirical, more positivist. But about 100 years ago, it became very systemic. The physicist and the chemist, and there was not much difference in the initial years, they were always thinking that now they have reached closest to the fundamental particles. But every time they thought they have reached to the fundamental particles, they found a system. So, if you look at the subatomic particles today, is it a particle? It still we call it particle, but is proton a particle? Is a neutron is particle? No, actually proton, neutron keep converting into each other by emitting pi plus meson. And then there are quarks and there are neutrinos.
And this is all in the last 50 years, what has been the base unit of existence has changed.
In 1949, thanks to the cosmic rays research, even till that time, 49 candidates of the fundamental particles were identified. And they cannot be particles. Actually, there is a system. So you have to,
Connecting this science to the topic of the non-translatability, right? Yeah. So in this context, how do you translate the word Anu or Paramanu, which is there in the Nyaya Vaisheshika Shastras, in schools, etc. They, even Marathi and in English textbooks, when they translate it, they use Anu or Paramanu for atom. But the Anu that is there in the Nyaya Vaisheshika Darshana, or the Paramanu that is talked about, is it actually the atom that we know today?
And did they mean that, or did they have a more philosophical understanding?
So there is a need to go, beyond just this need to translate everything very literally. Go and know the concept first, right? So because we were talking about science and also non-translatability, it's important to understand the concept rather than attempt at just a one-pointed translation, right?
So okay. So I will not say, okay, we knew about it. I knew you are going to come back. It is not the sadistic pleasure I am trying. I am saying that, okay, science has to grow fast as possible so that it can reach its limit. And whenever science has reached its limits, it has not found the wall. It actually, it has found sometime bridge and sometime new realm. These are called paradigms. So the Kuntz, the philosopher of science, that's what he explains, that the paradigms exist. One paradigm remains prominent, but when you examine, and then you realize, okay, these basic assumptions are not explaining the phenomena well, then...
That's happened in Western science also. Theory of general and special relativity, when it trumped Newtonian physics in some sense, it exactly did this. It's like they didn't hit a wall. They just discovered that, hey,
there's a new way. Yes. And sometimes you get beautiful bridges. Sometimes, that is in the Nyaya called Anuman.
Which I'm sure is mistranslated.
Which is inference.
So guys, that was part 1 of our episode with the team from Dharmawiki. We hope you enjoyed it. Part 2 is either out already or going to come out very shortly. Please stay tuned for that. And if it's already out, please go check it out. Once again, this is The Overcorrection. Please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and see you next time.